Hey, cyclists, Toronto cyclists and urban cyclists and whatever cyclists. I wanted to do a little demonstration on how to map out a route, a cycling route, using Google Maps. This is the best way that I know to map out a cycling route when you don't know how to get somewhere. And it's available to anyone. It's free. You can use it in any kind of modern web browser. And it's pretty easy to use, and I've been using it for years to do this. I know all the tricks, and the basic trick is, unlike most software, you can just kind of use this the way that it wants you to use it. You don't have to, it doesn't punish you for using it in a normal way, which I really like. So somebody went on a Toronto bike Facebook page and was looking for some suggestions for directions somewhere, so I'm going to use their route as an example. So they had to get from the Casa Loma area to the Liberty Village area as a daily commute, and they're like, I want to avoid the mains, which I completely understand. They want to avoid the RTO roads because that's super dangerous and crappy and polluted. And what else were they looking for? Just something that was sustainable on a daily basis, that they're really trying to find the best route, and a route can make all the difference. It really totally can. There's routes that I've discovered where I was like, I can't believe I've been taking this one route to get through some area for years, only because I was so familiar with the area that I didn't even think to do this and go on Google Maps and see if I could find a better way to unlock the route. This is what you kind of have to do in Toronto. I don't know about what it's like elsewhere, but in Toronto, where cycling is highly discouraged and the cycling infrastructure that we do have really sucks, and there's all these side streets and stuff that are accidentally really safe for cycling on and really fast, route planning can change your life. It's crazy. So here's how you do it. I opened up the directions thing, which is right here. You can also do this by just clicking on some area. Now it's getting finicky with me. Alright, check it out. Okay, so let's say a neighborhood name. I really like this, how it sort of gives you these neighborhood names. And sometimes they can be, they can be a little contentious, but where are we even going from? Where's Casa Loma? Okay, so there's Casa Loma. So I'm going to be like, alright, there's Casa Loma. Give me directions to Liberty Village. I just start typing something in, and then it will match you up with something. It'll match you up with neighborhood names, which is really cool. And of course, I got two problems right here. It's defaulting to driving directions. I had a couple of friends chatting with me the other day about this, and they're like, well, Google Maps doesn't even have cycling directions. And I'm like, I knew it. I knew Google would succeed in hiding their cycling directions when they moved them into this little thing here. You see, when you, I should really have my cursor visible in this for this demonstration. I'm being really bad, but I'm just as I point at this little these three dots here, this etc. dots, where there is totally enough room to have the whole menu, right? They have no reason to hide the cycling and flights not available buttons under this other thing. So it's a great way of accidentally impeding cyclists from finding their routes, just through this one little usability issue that managed to convince a couple people that I know who use Google Maps that cycling directions are not part of it, just by that one little omission. So the cycling directions are there. They are just hidden in this terrible, stupid little spot. So you just gotta click that. Ooh, big deal. My second problem is that they're out of order. I want to go to Liberty Village from Casa Loma, not the other way around. So I can just switch them by clicking on this cute little up and down arrows that are on the right side of these things that are, damn, I really should have, anyway. So I'm going from Casa Loma to Liberty Village. My next problem is that Google, and I can hide this little side panel that's obscuring my thing by clicking on this little triangle in this tab, this collapse thing. So Google is, for some reason, assuming that I want to... Actually, it's not doing too bad. It's that Google, it sort of gives you a couple of suggestions here. And it is recognized that Shaw is a great north-south street for cyclists. And so it's assuming that I want to use Shaw. And it is right. I do want to use Shaw. I do want to recommend Shaw. But the thing is, the first thing you want to do when route planning is recognize your barriers. Barriers are, and by that I mean like stuff that sort of forces you through choke points. And by choke points I mean spaces that you and a whole bunch of other commuters are being forced through, funneled into, because of big barriers that span whole neighborhoods. And in Toronto, it's all about the rail lines and the highways. In this part of Toronto, it's all about the rail lines. And it's just this box of rail lines. There's one going northwest, one going like east-west, and then another one that comes down through here. And you can see, I don't know, there's these different versions of the map. There's only like 2 different versions. In the map making thing, there's actually a whole bunch of different background maps that you can choose from. So if you're making, like, and this will be maybe another tutorial or something, but you can go the next level and make your own map and then put a whole bunch of routes like this on that map and map out your whole like life. And you know, if you're worried about privacy concerns, if you're worried about getting scoped by out of control government intel agencies, then do not do this, because you will have all of your ways through the city mapped out in this very specific way, which I do. So if anyone wants to discover how I get everywhere and ambush me or something like that with political messaging, then by all means hack into my my Google account and you'll have full access. Because it really does make it that easy. You can have a whole bunch of these routes on one map, and you can have a map that that tilts and does all this crazy stuff, like with the 3D, like when you switch to Earth by clicking this box in the lower left here. I'm gonna point it out with my hands. By clicking on, this is so cool. I love this program. This is like open broadcast software. This is my screen capping program. So this this box here, this box here will switch you back and forth from like a map to the satellite Earth thing, and then actually over here you can, if you get into your menu, you can go to like a cycling one, which shows you in green all this crazy stuff. That menu. See that menu right there, right there. My finger looks so big because it's all close to the camera. That menu will switch from these different, like, sort of highlighting modes. And anyway, when you're in satellite mode, you can do crazy stuff to the map. So you can. All I'm doing here is I'm just going to hold down Control and I'm going to drag the map around. So like normally dragging the map around with your mouse, which is like where you sort of like you click down and then you hold it while you move the mouse, it just moves the map around. But if you hold down Control, something very magical happens. The map becomes a 3-dimensional video game like. I love this feature so much. This is so fun. This is what I always wanted. And so I'm zooming here. I'm using my mouse button, my mouse wheel here to zoom in and out. And yeah, holding down Control and moving the map around to rotate it and stuff. This is a good way to familiarize yourself with the route and even to make decisions, such as the one that I was getting to talk about first, which is dealing with barriers. So the barriers that are involved in this particular commute are in the form of these 2 rail lines. There's one line that goes out. My mouse isn't. There's one line that goes along there, right? And then this other line that goes along there. And so you got to cross these 2 rail lines. In Toronto, rail line crossings are total punishment zones for cyclists. So you have to go, through these horrendous tunnels and get buffeted by crazy-ass motorists. So here's where Google Maps is suggesting that I cross this first line. Now, what I just did was super cool, but all I did was I zoomed in. I just kept zooming in. You can do this by clicking the zoom buttons right here, and just keep zooming. And if you keep zooming far enough, it will bring you to this panoramic street view thing, which you can drag around. For people who know about this stuff, it's like yeah. But I mean, when I first did this, I was like, oh gosh, is it going to be what I think it's going to be? But for somebody who has never envisioned this happening in terms of like being able to walk around a city like this virtually, this is so cool and so crazy, right? So it's really neat. So why do I not want to use Christie? Why do I not want to recommend Christie, even though it has a beautiful bike lane going through it? Well, I don't know. I mean, I would probably give it a shot, but the thing is that beautiful bike lane going through here is likely going to be absolutely covered with dangerous road debris and could be all broken up with a bunch of crap. So that's something that I would like to, you know, if I was like taking this route, I would want to sort of check that out. But because Christie's also somewhat busy, and because I don't really want to use Davenport all through there, I'm going to actually scope out this other little crossing that I noticed. And you can sniff out these crossings and these barriers. What you do is you get your route up like this. You're like, okay, all right, so that's my main route. But where are the barriers? And you do it by sort of like dragging. What I'm doing is I've held down this one point on the map and dragged it around, and now it's an official waypoint on the map. And Google has anchored my route there, so whatever else I do with it, it passes through that spot. So that's a good way to say I have to pass through this spot, Google Maps. You can't force me to go somewhere else. So this is how you customize your route. So I'm also, by dragging it around, what I'm also discovering is, you'll notice in this whole area along here, it sort of snaps to spots that are relatively far away from each other. Whereas in the neighborhood that I'm dragging the actual thing around in, it's going through all these different routes. And so I can see that there's some kind of barrier right there, because I have no routes on either side of those two routes, and I'd have to go east out of my way. So what I want to do is find something like right here. So I'm like, oh, okay, well that's a rail line. That's a barrier. So I got to choose my crossing. And I'm going to scope out all the crossings here. There's Bathurst. There's no way I'm using Bathurst. Absolutely not an option. But look at this. It's sort of highlighted in green. I mean, sometimes these streets with designated bike lanes, which are in solid green, like this one and this one, sometimes they can be great. But Davenport right here, I hate it. It sucks. It's dangerous. It's like, it's fast because you can't afford to slow down to be slow enough for it to be safe. So it's not really, this is what I'm talking about in terms of like crappy infrastructure. Some of these bike lanes are not like, you can't just be like, oh, there's a bike lane there, I'm all good. Because on your way to work, when you don't have time to spare, you could just end up getting into a collision that is super preventable. So I'm looking at Howland here, I'm like, ah, nice, no bike lane. So there's no excuse for people to let any spot get super dirty and awful and whatever. And I'm not going to get busted for deking out of the way of any stuff. And it also seems like this lane is just barely wide enough to accommodate, well, it's generously wide to accommodate me and a driver, but it's just barely too narrow to accommodate two drivers, one passing the other. This is exactly what keeps cyclists safe, is spaces that are simply too narrow for one driver to pass another driver. And this is what actually makes roads reasonable to use in general. This is what makes them safe to safe for pedestrians, safe for drivers, safe for everybody, is just simply not encouraging a whole bunch of competitive commuting in the form of like drivers passing each other. So I'm like, all right, I have christened Howland as my official crossing point for this barrier. And since I have this other barrier to deal with down here, I'm not going to worry about this stuff in the middle until I have sorted out where I want to cross this thing. This rail line is pretty evil because it turns this intersection here. I'm like, oh, okay, well, if I didn't already know to avoid this spot like the plague, then I would just zoom in and be like, oh, let's see what this rail crossing is like. And then I'd be like, yeah, there's no way that I'm using this road. Absolutely no way. Wide enough for one driver to pass another. It looks like the kind of place that I would want to speed through at 60 kilometers an hour if I was driving. So if that's the only way to get into Liberty Village, I'll just get a different job somewhere else, because there's no way I'm making that commute every day. Fortunately, I don't have to do that. And the way I can discover that is, again, to drag this around looking for a different spot. I'm like, there's gotta be a better way, there's gotta be, oh, I can cross through Dufferin, that's terrible, that's terrible. Can't even cross here, even though they just have a rail, they just have a pedestrian cyclist bridge right there, but no, the city hates us and wants us all dead. So, but I'm discovering, ooh, look at this, on Strawn, there's another way to cross these tracks. So I can zoom in on that, check that out. Ooh, look how civilized Strawn is. So civilized. This is actually kind of an interesting part of Toronto. Is this covered rail thing. I really feel like at some point a whole bunch of activists are going to camp out there. Either that or just homeless people just camp out on the top of this thing because it's just because it's so strange and unique, and I just don't see why it's there. But it's kind of a cool architectural feature of this area. So I'm like, okay, well, from the top that looks pretty good. From fairly close up that looks pretty good. So I take, oh, and I just go in through East Liberty. That's not so bad. Look at that. Oh yeah, not so bad. So I've got this route down Strawn. So I'm like, okay, well, I got to end up on Strawn. How the heck do I end up on Strawn? Let's backtrack from here. Oh, it goes through the park. Cool. And yes, it's perfectly legal to cycle through these park roads. And then I'm still basically taking Shaw, which apparently is a pretty good contraflow, and you can check that out by zooming in to the max. And yeah, that, like, I'll like that. Sure, why not? There's a few good reasons why not in the case of Shaw, like the college crossing completely blows chunks. But I mean, you can always just use the crosswalk. Just get off your bike and use the crosswalk. I take a right, make a U-ey, and then take another right, and then explain why that's not illegal to anyone who bugs me about it. So I'm like, okay, well, great, let's follow Shaw all the way, but what if I don't want to take Shaw? What if I want to be a little bit more tactical and like side streets and whatever? You can't drag stuff, like, you can't drag these points around if you're in 3D view and you're like, why is the route customization not working? You have to go back to 2D to drag the map routes around. But check it out, there's no barriers here. Look at all these wicked side streets I could go through. So I can plan a side street route. I'm like, oh, look at Grace Street. That's pretty direct, right? There's like, some streets are direct but nice. Other routes are maybe indirect but a little nicer or something like that. But I'm liking this idea of taking Grace Street all the way up, if I can, or all the way down. Yeah, that seems like no problem. And then I just hang a right there, and I could even go in through this side street right here. Yeah, just go through Gorevale. And then, perfect. That's a good way to get through that park. Okay, look at that. See, I've made a nice little route. It's nice and cool. Now I'm going to do something that is also super cool. I'm going to make sure that my route is good for both directions. So I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to get there. I figured out how to get there, but I got to be able to get back too. So because I've already customized this route, and I love the route now. I mean, look what I've done with the place. If I add a destination here, I can do this by, like, when you're first making your route, what you want to do is you put in your like where you're coming from, you put in where you're going, and then you add a third thing using this little button right here. You add a third entry, which is your original point of origin. So it should say Casaloma, Liberty Village, Casaloma, and then it'll do this round trip, so you get to see whether your route works in both directions, which, you know, it won't if there's a whole bunch of one-way streets that you're using and you can't use on the return route. So what I'm doing is I'm adding a waypoint here to anchor this in King West Village, and then I'm actually going to drag my destination point all the way back to Casa Loma, home base. And so, as you can see, it's created this return route that doesn't have any of my customizations on it, and so I'm going to see if those things work for the return route. There's this little trick here. If you drag one of these waypoints and drop it like right on another one, it will remove both of them, which is dumb. So don't do that. So for this one, it looks like Grace is not two-way. It is one-way. So, and the northern lane of the counterflow on Shaw is actually pretty good. So I'm just going to leave it at Shaw, and I can remove this by just clicking on it. But I do want to avoid Davenport because Davenport sucks. And oh, look at this! I've got this plan to take DuPont all the way to Christie, and take Christie down. Was that my plan? Was that even my plan? That's crazy. I don't want to take Christie. Christie's high speed. Christie's insane. So I'm gonna, and I don't want to take DuPont. So I'm gonna be like, okay, I will take DuPont as long as I can take take Howland down to here, and then go west on whatever road that is. And then I wonder if I can take that same route back. Look at that. Ah, I can. It's gonna work. It's gonna work. I made a route. So here's my route. So I'm going to the right of the park on the way down, and I'm going to the left of the park on my way back. That's fine. That's just fine. That's just fine. Except I hate Shaw Street along this point, so I'll just deke over to this street next to it, whatever that is. La, 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 la. That's not so bad, except I don't want to take that out. So I'm like dragging the return route waypoints to the same crossings, but you can see I'm like trying not to leave them too close to each other because of the bug that I mentioned earlier, where it will like remove both spots. So I've made the route. Look at that. Isn't that cool? And super easy and fun. Now I gotta remind myself how like what it looks like on the return trip. So I'm like, okay, all right, put myself in the headspace. I cross over this spot that was obviously under construction before or after the that's a little bit outdated, that image, but and you can actually see when pictures were taken. Like right here it says imagery copyright 2016 Google Map data, so it says that on the very bottom. So you can see, you know, when some picture was taken, and the street view actually will show you the month that the picture was taken in, which is good because you can see it was that, you know, is it still under construction, or what, you know, how recently was it under construction, how recently was this one business removed or something like that. You can figure it out. So I'm like, oh, okay, so I'm taking Strawn. Why does it have me going on to King West? Whatever, I don't need to go on to King West. So I'm going back along Strawn. That's cool. Strawn, up to the park. Oh, look at that cute little gate. Alright, so apparently I can go through this park, and yes, you can. But I'm going up Crawford. Yay, Crawford. Cool, whatever. Crawford. I can also use the direction keys on my keyboard, like the up, down, left, right keys, to just sort of go through this. It really does play like a video game. Like I love this so much. If you're curious about some spot that's covered by too many trees or whatever, you just zoom way in and you're like, oh, do it on Street View. Yeah, Crawford looks legit. This is the type of road that is damn safe for cyclists. Look at that. Not enough room for one driver to pass another. That's the key feature of a cycling safe route. On Street View, you can just click in the distance. Like, all I'm doing is clicking like the road on this location right here. And you can just go boom, 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 boom. You can also continue to use your arrow keys on your keyboard, but sometimes they break, like here, where it doesn't know that forward is forward. But let's see if I can. So all I'm doing, yeah, I'm holding down my keyboard keys, and it's kind of scrolling through the road. You can turn left and right. I mean, it's like, for somebody who grew up on video games, it's so familiar, and it's so creepy, but it's so cool to be able to do this. For someone who didn't grow up on video games, I can only imagine the reaction of somebody who's like 60 or 70, who who grew up with maps. See, my generation is sort of map illiterate, which is really, really, really to our own detriment. We don't even know which way. When I get lost in Toronto, and all I want to know is what direction this direction is, and just the cardinals. I'm like, just which way is north? Because I just need to go southeast. No, but people act as if I'm like panhandling or something like that. They're like, whoa, like this attitude, like, man, I'd be willing to help this guy if he would only make sense. And I'm seriously just asking which way north is. So, but there's tons of people who don't understand the very basics of orienteering. So right now, I'm going to explain the absolute most basic aspects of orienteering for people who have just never had any reason to know it. And I think as a someone who was in, like, I was in Cubs and Scouts, and I grew up in the Yukon, so maybe for those two reasons, I just assume that everybody knows what north, south, east, and west is, and what that means on the earth. What it means in Toronto is, like, uphill is basically north, and the downhill to the lake is south, and east and west are a little more complicated. Montreal is east, and the prairies are west. But Toronto's on, like, it's on kind of this tilt, but so it's on this grid. It's not like Montreal where it's like on the diagonal, so it's like northwest, southeast, whatever. It's like west, southwest, and stuff like this. Like, it's this angle that goes between that. So if it was like this, then you could say, like, yeah, take Bloor northeast and go. At this point, we can say take Bloor and go east, but it's not really east, it's east-northeast. So sometimes when I'm mapping stuff and I just want the whole thing a little bit more simple, you can see that when you get into the satellite view, it offers you that opportunity to rotate things, and so you can get the view of the world with the South Pole facing up, and see how many ancient map makers viewed the world before it was decided for political reasons to create this kind of myth of north being up and south being down, because apparently, there is actually no reason to do that. But I like to rotate the thing, even if I'm keeping it flat, so that the grid is like in a straight up and down grid. So if you're making a map for yourself, this is how you'd want to have it. So this is another feature I like about Google Maps, is it allows you to sort of tilt everything so that it's just easier to read. Like, how much easier is that to read? You're like, oh yeah, let's take that south, but it's not quite south. It's not quite south, it's south-southeast. But that's how orienteering works, and how the basics of how Google Maps directions work. And I'm quite sorry that it took a half hour for me to explain this topic, that I probably should be able to distill these instructions down to 10 minutes, but hope you enjoyed my complete lack of brevity. Have a wonderful day and a great commute, and when in doubt, yield to everybody. Get off your bike and walk through tough spots. Bike on the sidewalk super slow, like at a walking pace, and yield to everybody. Don't try to pass pedestrians on the sidewalk. Don't try to don't try to do crazy stuff. It's cool for portions of your commute to be an act of civil disobedience, but civil disobedience means civilized. It means you have to do it. This is why half of my commute is me patiently yielding to impatient drivers who have the unfair advantage of the road being designed to exclude me and make their lives hard. Like, driving really, really, really sucks. It's not good. It's not fun. It's not cool, especially in the city. It really, really, really blows. But, you know, cyclists don't have safe road access right now. But we have safe road access to these side streets and stuff. So if we get good at wayfinding, if we get good at, like, mapping out our commutes and stuff like that, then we can actually, because cycling in Toronto is, like, easier and safer than it's like it can be easier than it actually is for most cyclists. And route mapping, wayfinding and stuff like that is a huge part of that. It's a huge part. I'm only cluing into how important this wayfinding side of things is now, after, you know, pretty much a decade of heavy-duty daily city cycling, where I've been putting myself in a ton of mostly unnecessary danger, because either I haven't been willing to yield, because I'm not legally required to yield and I don't feel that I should have to and I'm trying to hold my space, or because I simply don't know that there's a way, way, way better route. Like over here on Dundas, for example. Here, this is like, the video's over. You can check out something else. But over here on Dundas, okay. So I was taking Dundas from like Kensington Market over to Little Portugal, and this route sucks. Oh my gosh. Dundas along the park, it just gets so dangerous for no reason. It's so dangerous, and it's only because there's no parking. So there's no spot for cyclists to kind of hide in while the drivers are aggressively, unsafely, illegally passing us. So, you know, in this spot on Dundas during rush hour, you are so screwed. Like, okay, not this spot, but up here during rush hour, you're absolutely screwed as a cyclist. And I have just gotten in so many near collisions in this spot, and so I've, you know, tried and tried and tried to figure out what I can do. And of course, at some point, I just realized, like, oh, there's just this perfect little back alley thing I can take. Oh, that's cool. Sometimes, okay, this is your like bonus tip for, you know, watching till the end. Sometimes with cycling directions, what you really want to do is use walking directions. Because it's like, if you really want to figure out a route, you'll figure it out using both. You'll figure out the walking directions and the cycling directions. You'll be like, oh, there's that spot that Google Maps doesn't think I can bike through, and indeed I can't bike through, but I don't mind getting off my bike for the 2 meters that it requires me to walk through this spot. Right? There's lots of spots like that, like getting from Little Portugal into the Parkdale area. Or like getting from East Parkdale into West Parkdale. There's this spot where it's north of Queen, where you can't cycle through it legally, and you can't drive westbound through it at all because it's like there's a barrier. You can cycle through it illegally if you're willing to violate a one-way road, but if you're willing to just get off your bike and walk for like half a block, you can get through this one-way road without breaking the law and without, you know, you're not dumping garbage on your head. You're just being a pedestrian for a block, which in the middle of a bike commute, I don't even mind. It's fun. So anyway, so I'm using walking directions to discover this. I'm like, wait a minute, okay, check this out. I can just go oh, but the walking directions don't even honor those back ones. Oh, they do. So there you go. Look at that, look at that. There's a back alley I can take. Oh my god. I can take one there too. Holy moly. I can take one right there. Oh, look at this. And of course, if I go to the actual map, it's a little bit easier to see some of these back alleys and see some of the routes that they take. And holy moly, can that ever be useful? Even if it slows you down, because what is my alternative? I'm either going 30 kilometers an hour, about to get rear-ended by some crazy driver in the curb lane of Dundas West, or I'm going, you know, 10 kilometers an hour through the back alleys, about to be rear-ended by nobody, and you know, nobody wants my right of way. On Dundas, every single person on the road wants your right of way, even though they're not entitled to it, and they'll just take it from you. Or rather, they will not experience any. You will not get justice when your right of way is denied to you. So look at this. If I'm coming from Kensington Market, I don't even have to get up to this danger zone. I can take, okay, so as soon as I hit Claremont, I just hang a right on Claremont and a left on Plymouth, and then left on Grays, and then I go through this alley and the other alley, and then I can go back down to Dundas where it becomes almost safe again, and then I can just deke around that thing and take this back alley. So that's not so bad. Look at that. I just unlocked, like, for me, if I had done this, this 3 minutes of cartography, when I first moved into Little Portugal, like, I could have saved myself a whole bunch of close calls. I could have saved myself this one incident where, like, I got into a serious confrontation with this one driver. Like, there was no collision, but it was about 10 minutes of just continuous trauma for both of us. It was just so brutal. And it was completely unnecessary. It was along the strip, and there was no, I didn't need to even be there. I could have just been using, oh my gosh, I can go up there, and then I could go up to Harrison. Like, you know, not all the time, but sometimes you just, like, if you are on your way home from a crazy day at work, and you're over-caffeinated, and you're underslept, and you're awake and alert enough to be on a bike, but you're not awake and alert enough to be in, like, an athletic white-knuckle fight for your survival on the main roads. You're not, you know, you're like okay enough that you could drive those main roads, because as a driver you have safe access. As a cyclist you don't. So for those days where you're really not feeling it, a crazy back alley side route is just so much better than having to walk the duration. Like, before this stuff went down here on Richmond and Adelaide, I didn't have any way to go east and west through this section of downtown at all, because Queen is brutal, Dundas is brutal. Like, unless I'm going to go all the way north to Gerrard or all the way south to the waterfront, I had no way of getting through this part of downtown. There was no safe way, and so I was trying to hack these back alleys and just be like, oh, okay, well, can I go through this spot, and then maybe the back streets through there, and then, oh yeah, I could go through back of City Hall, and then Shooter will pick me up, and it's so irritating to have to do all this, like, planning and stuff. But I wish I'd done it, and just, like, what helps is you just sit down with some route that you have mapped out and just spend 10 minutes with it, just going over it. 10 minutes, 20 minutes, just going over it, and then bring up another map of the same area without the route on it, and then try to walk yourself through it and find your way through it using the using the earth. The really zoomed in slanted earth view, I find, is the best way to do that, to familiarize yourself with a route. You're like, okay, well, that's my route, but I'm going to just take off the bicycling directions thing, maybe even turn labels off, because you can't see these street, and there's half the street signs are missing. So you can, and I love this. I love this feature, labels off. Labels off is amazing. 3D on, also amazing, because you can see big hills and stuff like that. And actually, if you go to Street View, you can really get an idea for where your hills are during a commute. But the other kind of cool thing about maps directions is, why is it not giving me, like, oh yeah, okay, so if I turn it into a bike route, okay, so if I turn it into a really long bike route, there, see, it shows the the elevation. That's like your climb. Like this is like you're going down a hill, and then this is you're climbing up a hill, or you're going down a hill, you're climbing back up a hill. So this is how you can see, you know, you want to keep these crazy climbs out of your commute. In this case, this is because it's crossing a valley. So I'm like, oh, do I want to go down to that ravine path? Because that's there I am, descending into the ravine path. I'm like, this is that, you know, is that one straight stretch where I get really fast commuting worth the, you know, the hill and then the climb? Because me going down a hill is not awesome unless it's this really beautiful gradual hill. If it's a pronounced hill, it's just me wearing out my brakes and being all like, so that doesn't really help me in terms of speed, and then trying to climb back up at the end really sucks. So I'm like, well, you know, there's ravine paths, and then there's major roads, and maybe I should take the major roads to cross some of the ravines, you know, instead, because then I end up with... Why doesn't it show? It's like sometimes it doesn't show the elevations and stuff. So look at that. I don't want that. What the heck is that? You can, if you mouse over it here, it will show you which spot it's indicated. See this little thing that's moving around? As I as I hover across this, I'm like, what the hell is going on in that one spot? Okay, where is this happening? Where is this? Is it there? Why is it going way down? So I'm like, all right, if this was part of my route, I could be like, well, I don't want to do that. I'll just take Gerard. Oh, and I guess if it doesn't show you a little thing, it says it's mostly flat. So I guess if there's no you know, up and down thing, then it's just mostly flat, and it will just tell you that it's mostly flat, which is, that's so nice for a cyclist to have that. Holy moly, that's one of the things that sucks. When you're cycling around, is having all these hills. Toronto doesn't have that many hills, but they're like landmines in your commute. So let's say you're like, now I'm a York resident. So let's say I'm going to York from no, let's say I'm going to the Don Valley from York, because Humber Valley just isn't gorgeous enough for me all the time. And true story. You know, Humber it's fantastic, but you know, it's not for everybody, not all the time. Well, I got these 3 routes I can take here. It's kind of, these are routes that I would customize, but it's like, okay, there's 3 major ways you can get there. This one I'm like, yeah, okay, that's pretty gradual. It's not so bad. Plus, take the K. Gardner Beltline Trail. Yeah, it's the most direct. That's super fun. Well, this is like a bad way to make an example of this, but I do know right here, it's like right around here somewhere, there's this crazy hill. Let's see here, where can I find this insane hill? I guess it's like over here, actually. Why can I not demonstrate anything when I need to demonstrate stuff? I remember this a little better than I thought I did. For real. Maybe it is on the east side of Alabama. Oh, I know where it is. It's on the east side. Oh, I'm way too far east for this. So, check it out. Check out that gap. That's a huge gap. And it's like making fun. Well, whatever. There's this hill somewhere in here. It's, oh, you know where it is? It's like right here, I think. This insane hill. Come on, where is it? I mean, you can use this to find hills, which is cool. I wish that it would just give you a topo map, just a topographical map. Not that anybody who's watching even knows what that is, because y'all are totally cartographically illiterate. That's so sad. But check it out, I found a bump. I'm like, oh, there's kind of a hill there that I might not need to climb. There we go. Now there's no bump in my commute. Right, like these little bumps are, anytime you're going up and then coming back down, this is energy that you're wasting. So if you see a big pronounced bump somewhere in your commute, I mean, most any Toronto north-south commute is going to be a hill. And see, it's all going to be like this because Toronto's next to a lake, and everything north of it is up on this hill. It's a beautiful bit of topography for a city. You can really see why people are into this. There's these 3 roads, 3 rivers that, like, these days, we don't do anything with any of the stuff that led to Toronto being geographically here, but Toronto is the confluence of these 3 incredible rivers on this beautiful lake in this one spot where there's basically no crazy hills or anything like that. It's just a great hangout spot, and that's why, that's why Toronto's here, not somewhere else. But east-west, you're looking at these big ravines. So if you're going on a big, huge east-west route, you might want to get down on the waterfront because it's basically flat. So it's like the waterfront, or you got this type of thing, where you got these dips, these hills in your commute. Look at all this crap. You don't want to go through that. Like, half of the reason that, if you get cycling directions to any 2 points in Toronto that are very far from each other in terms of east and west, maps will invariably recommend that you take the waterfront path. You'll be like, oh my god, seriously, I've got to around this whole thing is crazy. Like, if I'm going from York to the some to some other spot, and I'm cycling it. Oh, I want to be simple. There's a certain point at which, oh my gosh, there's a certain point at which it will just default to telling you to go along the bottom there. And it's faster. It's crazy how close a couple of points can be in east and west, and how far away they can be from the waterfront before it starts recommending that you just go straight across the city. You have to be pretty far north in terms of your destination for Google Maps to actually estimate that you're going to have a faster direct ride. But the thing is, the direct ride, like, you're thinking like, oh, well, I don't want to get down into the ravine that takes me onto the path that gets me down to the river and go across and then go through the other ravine trail and then have to go up the steps or whatever. But all you're doing is avoiding a whole bunch of ups and downs along the way. Check out that route. That sucks. You gotta climb up in this stupid spot right here, the big hill right around that area, which really blows. And then it wants to take you through this spot. Obviously, you're going to want to figure out a different route along that, but sometimes there's no way around it. Toronto is hilly in certain ways, and it's flat in certain other ways, so there's a lot of commutes you really should, on a bike, you really should consider using ravine paths if it doesn't involve you going up and down too much. If you're just going down into the ravine path, like this one here, the beautiful Humber Valley Trail, which is easy to stay on as long as you have memorized the route, because it gets you get bumped off the route every once in a while. You have to take side streets back onto it. They don't have enough wayfinding signage because it's a recreational trail, right? Nobody's going to use it for commuting. It's like, yeah, okay, this is our highway right here. So there's a whole bunch of routes that you're just going to end up being like, oh, okay, well, it's basically finding the route from the waterfront trail north into town, or finding the route from the waterfront trail north into the beaches neighborhood that you live in, or into Mimico or whatever where you live. That's going to be the thing. You're going to be finding the routes off of this main kind of, this is the closest thing that cyclists in Toronto have to highways. This network of, and it's just a box, and it goes, I'll just demonstrate it for you here. This is the, in terms of roads where we do not have to yield to drivers all over the place and get screwed up by drivers trying to ignore our commuting rights. This is the kind of route that's easier to find with labels off. Because, let's see here, where is that? There we go. Finch Hydro Corridor.
look at that, so beautiful. Oh, except you have to go around a bunch of stupid stuff here and there, but then you can get back in there and get back on it. So the Finch Hydro Corridor is our cycling superhighway that extends east-west across the span of Toronto in the north end, basically between Eglinton and the superhighway for drivers right here, which completely disrupts everybody's north-south commute when you get to that point. But yeah, that's our east-west route. On the west side, it joins up with the beautiful Humber Trail somewhere around here. And then the Humber forms the sort of the west segment of the thing, sort of vaguely like this, goes down there to the waterfront. And then along the waterfront, obviously, completes the south end of the box. And for all the middle parts, we rely on this terrible network of on-street cycling lanes to keep us out of reach of these terrible drivers, which basically are like 1 in 20 drivers are total dangerous bullies, and then maybe another 2 in 20 drivers are like it's easy for bullies to bully them into participating in more road bullying. That's seriously just the way it is. It's like 1 in 20 drivers, 1 in 20 cyclists, 1 in 20 pedestrians, something like that. 1 in 20 police officers, they want you dead. Maybe just 1 in 20 people are just completely screwy and have to be avoided. And when they have tons and tons and tons of power, you really just want to get out of their way and off their roads. So it's great to know all these routes for avoidance of the mains, because the mains of Toronto are generally cyclist hostile. And the city is so beautiful with labels off. I love just cruising Google Maps like this and being like, wow, look at all the colors, man. Check that, it's so artistic, man. It's so beautiful. And the valleys, I mean, look at this lush, like, oh, look at that. And of course, there's a freaking water treatment plant there. But this, look at Crowder's Woods, oh, it's so beautiful, it's so pretty. The trees are even rendered in 3D. Like, tell me that's not a viable piece of graphic art right there. That's super cool looking. Especially since I can rotate around it and discover where my favorite stands of conifers and whatever are. Ooh, look at that, cedars. You can't really tell that. The satellite thing is just awesome, and the 3D thing is just awesome. I just hope they release a API for making games with it, so that you can just be like, oh, I want to make a little, fighting game in Google Maps or whatever, and it'll just make you a 3D game or a side scroller or something. Like, look at this. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's an old Nazi emblem. It sort of reminds me of something there. Up close and personal, it reminds me of my childhood as a that's my childhood right there. Not on this highway, but on similar highways. Just like getting into the car, getting on the highway, waiting in traffic, breathing fumes, getting out of the car, being in the parking lot, waiting for the other traffic, walking in. It's just like, oh, I'm so glad to have left that life behind my adulthood. Like, when I moved to Toronto, it's just like, there's no way I'm doing this as a driver, because I've been driving for 15 years. And it's like, not into continuing that tradition in the family. Like, no! If I move to where it is good to drive, I will go ahead and drive. That'll be awesome, but God, not in a city. This is like my opportunity to get around super fast on a bike. Having a racing bike is great, but this crazy Rally Delta, it's a Rally Challenger. It's just an awesome racing bike. In terms of barriers, talking about barriers, look at this. This is what I was talking about. Bits and pieces of infrastructure where around this area, you have to choose between 2 crossings which are relatively far apart. Oh, check it out. Bonus, bonus, bonus. I'll show you a measure distance. You right click, hit measure distance, and click on your other point, it will tell you 1.4 kilometers is how far you have to travel out of your way if you live on one side or the other of this thing and you just want to get to the other side. So that means if you're commuting north-south through this area, you have to deke around this relatively large barrier. This is a rail yard. Because it's already blocked off, planners use it as an opportunity to block off even more space. So because of this rail yard, they don't just put a path surrounding the rail yard so you can go past it on its north side or south side. Oh no, that would be too easy. They buffer a whole bunch of neighborhoods. You have to go around in the neighborhood too if you're going east, west, whatever. And in this section you have to go around like all this residential stuff, a whole bunch of commercial stuff. You have to take these side streets which are blocked like right there to minimize traffic, right? To minimize vehicular traffic. And so these barriers force commuters onto one of 4 streets, all of which are terrible. Keel right here. Runnymede, which, oh, it's got a bike lane, how awesome. Yeah, that bike lane is full of sharp, terrible garbage and big cracks in the road, so screw that. Those are your 2 choices if you are going past this section. And it really sucks. It totally sucks, but you have to be aware of it. And so if you're planning a pretty far commute going north and south of there, it's not such a big deal because you can dodge around there. But if your commute is like from right over here to right over here, this blows. Really blows, because you really do have to decide between one of these 2 awful rail crossings. You can't be like, well, I'll go take Scarlet. Truthfully, there is no good rail crossing along this entire section of rail. It is all terrible, and both Keele and Dundas are terrible for cyclists. So this is just a blackout zone. This is just a dead space, a dead zone in Toronto for cyclists. And, you know, applies for much of the junction, even though the actual junction, like when you get into the neighborhood, okay, that's not the junction, but the area between Hyde Park and Junction is very cyclist permeable. It's wonderful to go through there. The area on this side of it is really not so bad if you know all the back roads. And it's just, you know, when you have this barrier that is like a completely dangerous rail crossing, completely dangerous rail crossing, completely dangerous rail crossing, and I guess obviously they're not willing to put a shared like pedestrian cyclist bridge through here, but if they were willing, all they would have to do is make a 100-meter bridge to span a barrier that is like over a kilometer wide. Just saying. Just saying.